The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning for those of us joining from the West Coast. Good afternoon joining from the East Coast, and good day for the rest of you. We're back again for another one of our webinars. This time, Agile v. Waterfall. Court is in session. So there's that classic ongoing debate. We thought about time that we tackled this. Yeah, hopefully we'll dispel some myths and come up with some things that might, well, maybe surprise you, hopefully. As is always, our hosts today, myself and Lauren, and a quick shout out to Lauren. Congratulations for passing your PMP. So Lauren wrote on Monday? Yeah, she wrote on Monday and passed, so yay, welcome to the club. So she's now joining all of those of you who are out there going, I need PDUs for maintenance. Okay, so we have our control panel as always. The little red arrow will collapse it down if you need a little more real estate on your screen. The little blue box with the square, that's for the chat window. So if you have any questions, comments, thoughts along the way, as always, we want to make these sessions very interactive. And of course, you can raise your hand. Lauren will be monitoring that for us. So that if you do have any issues or concerns or questions, please put that in and we'll make sure that those are caught. As always, our interactive sessions, when you see this little icon pop up, that's your chance for or that's us asking for interaction, so questions and polls. We've got a couple today. And if the sound or the technology isn't quite working right, give it a few minutes. Usually it catches up. We do record all of our sessions so that we can replay them in the future, and you can always pick that up later. So the voice syncing. My contact info is david.donaldson@TitleShift, and of course lauren.connor@titleshift.ca as well. So if you do have any issues, Lauren is monitoring her email as we go. So let's get started. Now, our format, as we've been doing for all of these webinars, and I think it works well, we've been getting good feedback on this, is to have an opening thought. But when I was putting this one together, I kind of thought, we've actually got two opposing views here, so it would make most sense to have two thoughts. So our first one, so I Googled and went to in search of quotes, and one of the first ones that popped up, which I just love, is Scrum, and Scrum is an agile methodology. Scrum is like your mother-in-law. It points out all of your faults, and unfortunately that one's attributed anonymously, but it really does kind of encapsulate in a lot of ways Agile, because when you do Agile, you need to be good. Agile is a great tool. In the right hands, it's very, very effective. In the wrong hands, it can be a real problem. So it's like, we need to have a higher level of discipline if we're going to move into that world. The second quote, and I pulled this from Peter Drucker, nothing is less productive than to make more efficient that which should not be done at all. And this one, I actually wrestle with this one a little bit because it actually applies to both Agile and Waterfall, and we'll explore that a little bit more as we go. But basically the simple tenet here is, if we shouldn't be doing it, it doesn't matter how good or how well or how fast or how efficient we do it, we shouldn't be doing it. Right? And really want to tie this into the end state or the goal that we're working towards, because Waterfall is very goal focused and very end state focused. Okay. Now we're going to start off with our first poll, and just to save a little bit of bandwidth, etc., I'm going to just turn off my webcam, and I'll turn that back on at the very end when we're doing our final closeouts. Okay, so our first poll today is, just want to get a feel for our audience out there. Are you using Agile? And is there any other way? So you're using Agile pretty much exclusively, a little from column A, a little from column B, so maybe a bit of a blend of Waterfall and Agile, or maybe you're leaning towards mostly Agile, or excuse me, mostly Waterfall, dabbling a little bit in Agile, or you're more of a traditionalist and you are doing just Waterfall and no Agile. So let's just open that poll up. Okay, so let's see how our results are doing here. 53% voted, 61% voted. Seeing some really good results coming in quickly, and thank you guys for being responsive, because that does help us move things along. As usual, we'll wait till we're about 70–80%. We're at 68% right now, so let's wait for a couple more to come in. %71 voted, 73. Give another few seconds. Beautiful. Results are flowing in fast and furious. Love it. Okay, let's have a look at our results. So as we see, and this is kind of what I expected, 4% using Agile only, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We are a big focus of what we're going to look at today is when I should apply which. 16%, little from column A, little from column B, so that balance, 48%. So close to half are doing mostly waterfall, but a little bit of Agile, and then 32%, the traditionalists, just, no Agile, we're kind of doing the waterfall thing, and that's totally cool. So relatively small speaking people who are on the uptake of Agile, and I think that's pretty indicative of project managers in general. Now, of course, you're always going to find pockets where it's this is an Agile shop and that's what we do. But yeah, so my focus today is really more about, let's look at what are the different things, the benefits and pros and cons of each, and when they would be appropriate. Okay, so we'll go back to our slides. And our next one, so I'm going to just shift away from the debate piece of this for a moment. I just want to pose this simple question. How do you gauge success, or how do we gauge success? And I'm talking about success within a project. So how do we gauge success? Just leave that one out there for a few minutes. So if you go into your questions box and answer in the questions box. Okay, so we're getting some great comments in, customer satisfaction, client satisfaction from Diane and Lauren, beautiful, absolutely. Meeting stakeholder requirements from Lindsay, on time, within scope, within budget from Laura, speed to market from Donald, absolutely. We're often dealing with windows of opportunity, getting a couple of the on time on budgets, successful delivery of the project, and then within budget. Functional projects, happy to use little or no bugs. So if we're looking, very much at the software side of things, absolutely. So the thing works on time and on budget. Expected quality level, beautiful, love it. Yes, absolutely. Sponsor stakeholder getting what they thought they will get. So meeting expectations from Mahesh, absolutely. And from Kingston, acceptance. Yes, totally agree. QA level from Serge. Yes, absolutely. Now, there's a couple of answers in there around being on time and on budget. And unfortunately, many of our projects are judged that way, but it is not a great way to go. It is not a great way to go from a judging success perspective. The problem that we have with that is you can deliver on time and on budget, and if I'm not delivering something that's needed, then we're wasting our time, we're wasting our money, right? So we want to make sure that we're really keeping in mind the fact that at the end of our project, we need to deliver something that is useful, that is beneficial to the organization. Now, one of the things I like to say throughout is when you're looking at your project budget, I want you to think the word investment, because what you're really doing is you're investing your organization's time and money and resources. And if I deliver within the project plan, but I'm not getting a return on that investment, then we've got a real problem, right? And we need to kind of address that. So how do we judge success? Well, we judge success basically on what we accomplish, not how we accomplish it. So, you find that there's often many, many ways to get the job done, and it's when we get the job done that's really the gauge of success. That's really truly when we say we have, success. And the reason I'm putting this in here is because when you take a look at the Agile Manifesto, the very first thing right out of the gate is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer, which it should be. And unfortunately in Waterfall, that is also the case, but unfortunately within Waterfall, that got a little bit lost because we got a little too focused on the process. So as I was doing my research to put this session together, I started looking at the Agile Manifesto, and I've read it before, but really started taking it apart and decoupling it and digging into it a little bit. And the more I do this, and every time I do this, I realize there's not huge amounts of differences here. So let's take a look at some of the fundamentals, some of the basics here. So we'll introduce our two contenders. Waterfall comes out of the Project Management Institute, which was founded in 1969. It is a framework. PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, it is a framework. It is not a methodology, and it has never professed itself to be a methodology. In fact, there are actually multiple methodologies that support PMBOK. Now, the other thing with PMBOK is it's really designed to support all project types. And this is an important element because as we see with Agile, it's actually specifically for software projects. So, we look at that and think, what projects are we dealing with here? And PMBOK is designed to support software projects. It's also designed to support standard construction projects, R&D projects, all kinds of different projects, right? So it's really to support those different types, and there are multiple methodologies. Now, Agile, and if you take a look at the Agile Manifesto, it was actually created by the Agile Alliance in 2001, and it is actually a methodology. So there's a bit of a difference here because PMBOK Waterfall, that's a framework and it's a methodology. So this has always been one of my pet peeves around this debate, which is the framework versus the methodology. And Agile is also specifically designed for software because it's actually the Agile software. The Manifesto for Agile Software Development is the actual title. So while it does a very, very good job, it is really specific to software. And in doing so, it's actually leveraging the unique environment of software to an advantage. Now, there are multiple methodologies that call themselves Agile. So we're going to be kind of looking at the generic ones. So there are some multiple methodologies there, but they all share common things. And really it's about the nuances between them. So let's take a look at the Agile Manifesto. And what I did is I adopted this from the actual manifesto, which is published online, and just covering off some of the key points here. Number one, first and foremost, as I already mentioned, customer satisfaction. Okay, and this is something that is documented in PMBOK and discussed in PMBOK. Unfortunately, the latest 5th edition, they're actually refocusing on that and kind of bringing that back to the surface a bit more. So customer satisfaction, they're doing it through early and continuous deliveries. Welcome changing requirements. Business and developers must work together, and I just love this point. And one of the kind of themes that I'm going to take a look at throughout our hour together today is, what are the similarities of Waterfall and Agile, and how can we use them complementarily as opposed to adversarially. So, we need the business, we need the developers, and whether that's a software developer or a building developer or a machine developer, whatever you're developing, you need to work together, right? Because we need to make sure that our developers are focusing on providing business needs and business requirements. A motivated team give them a supportive environment, and then trust them. And I've long been an advocator for, put together a good team and then get out of their way and let them do their work, right? Face-to-face conversation. So they actually state within the manifesto, the most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within the development team is face-to-face conversations. And it's almost ironic because this is a software. This is, you're dealing with, people who are at the leading edge of not only software development, but technology in general. So with that in mind, and they're the ones saying, face-to-face communication is most effective. And I completely agree. I think that's where we should be going. Now, can we leverage technology to enable that face-to-face when we're, not in the same room, same building, same country? Absolutely. But it's really that face-to-face, and that's why if you look at the Agile methodologies, they actually meet daily, and we have stand-ups and scrums where you get together, very short meeting, and they call them stand-ups because literally you stand. The concept here is, we're going to have a very short meeting. It's going to be 10-15 minutes. You're not even going to get comfortable sitting down because, there's no point in doing that. It's going to just slow things down. Let's get, quick together, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then let's get back to work, right? The next point, working software is the primary measure of success. And for those of you who were on our Earned Value webinar a couple months ago, this is what we're talking about. What is the deliverable? Have I delivered what I said I'm going to deliver? And when we talk about gauging success, this is what we're talking about when we say, make sure that you're actually delivering products, whether that's software products or other products that are going to, do that success. Now, when I first looked at Agile, I didn't notice this piece, but then when I kind of dug into it a little bit more, it actually surprised me a little bit, the sustainable pace. And I was really happy to read that because one of the challenges that we face within project management, regardless of what methodology we're using, is the whole concept of sprinting. And when you're doing a project that, regardless of its length, you need to make sure that the pace that you're doing is sustainable. I've had this experience, I'm sure many of you have, where we get onto a project and we're asked to run the whole time. We need to really come up with a sustainable pace. So, when they put together the manifesto, they're really looking at how do I keep this thing going? How do we do this in an effective method or way that's going to allow us to keep that pace and keep it going? And then this other one, and again, this is one that I don't remember researching last time, but when I did my research this time, it popped out at me. It's simplicity, which is really about efficiency. And the way they've stated it is they want to maximize the amount of work not done. And I thought, how brilliantly stated. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to limit the work that is done. So if we can maximize what we don't do, and hence the gold plating concept, the whole, if I don't need to do it, let's not do it, right? And then finally, continuous improvement, both in the product and the process. We need to be doing this from a standpoint that's going to not only do a good job, but build from that. So those are the core principles that are there. And when I read these and take a look at them, I'm not seeing a huge difference from the core principles that are in Waterfall, or more correctly, that should be in Waterfall. Because PMI is a framework, it's up to our interpretation as to how we implement it. So when we talk about, for example, welcome changing requirements, PMI has a number of processes around change control. And, when you read about them, it's all about, controlling that change. Well, when we say control change, one interpretation of control change is prevent change, is to make sure we stay the course to the original path. But the other take on it, which is the take that I've always, the approach I've always taken, is that when you're looking at change control, you are in fact really saying, let's make sure that the changes that should get through do, and the ones that shouldn't don't, and that the appropriate authority level has been, consulted, and the decision was made by someone who has the authority to do that. So I'm just going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to look at advantages and disadvantages of Agile, and then we'll look at advantages and disadvantages of Waterfall. So advantages of Agile. When we have evolving requirements, which leads to shorter cycles, this is really kind of the core of what Agile is. Agile is really all about, let's do a short development cycle, sprints. Let's do these short little cycles, and as we build, the requirements can evolve and we can react to that, hence the term Agile. And this is really where Agile really shines, is in this main element here. It encourages active involvement and interaction from key stakeholders, which is great because one of the basic core tenets of Agile is you cannot do this without having your developers and your business in constant communication, because basically what's happening is as the business is evolving their requirements, you're building them. So if you're not in that constant communication, we can't work in that environment. And then that sort of extends into the team itself. So we need this constant team involvement. We need structured communication. And one of the big myths of Agile is that it is not structured, when in fact it's actually highly structured. To do Agile well, you really need to have a highly disciplined team with a high amount of structure. And one of the biggest important elements there is the communication, because if you're going to be working in that dynamic of an environment, you need to have constant communication to be able to continue that communication. And then finally, the continuous improvement piece, which is your lessons learned, right? So these are, it allows us a shorter cycle. We can get that continuous improvement back into the process faster and quicker, and kind of be more reactive. Some disadvantages with Agile. The first and probably the most obvious is the target delivery date. Now, when we talk about, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to ask the question, how do we judge success? Because for all of those of you who are judging success about being on time and on budget, if you try to go down the Agile path, you're going to be in some serious trouble. The fact that Agile is a dynamic environment, is an environment that is responsive to that ever-evolving change, you can't predict, right? So, the delivery dates are going to be a little bit more fluid. They're going to be a little bit more, reactive. Now, there's of course always trade-offs, right? So, we need to now start to figure out what is the balance of what works and what doesn't. Business representation is continually required, and we talked about this earlier a couple slides ago. If I don't have that business representation, it's not going to work. It honestly, folks, it's not going to work. So, and we know whether we've done Agile or Waterfall in our projects, we're often struggling to get people's time, attention, to get people to actually sit down and have that discussion and think about it. Agile often runs into external stakeholder resistance. This is actually fairly common, and part of that is because external stakeholders often want a more defined timeline. They want a more defined what my end state. So having this external, having this very dynamic piece can be difficult for externals because they're not within the circle. They're not within the loop. So we have an increased communication requirement, which can of course lead to resourcing issues. So oftentimes the external stakeholders just sort of felt like they're left out of the loop, and there's all kinds of changes going on that they don't know. The final disadvantage, and how much this is a disadvantage or a requirement of Agile, but team members must be highly skilled and highly disciplined. And as many of you have said both on these webinars and in my classes and when we consult with companies, one of the biggest challenges we face in general in project management is just getting good, skilled people, right? And that's kind of a, not only in project management, but just in kind of business in general. Okay, so let's take a look at some advantages of Waterfall. One of the first advantages of Waterfall is the clearly defined goals / destination. And really this is the essence of Waterfall. is that, we figure out what the destination is first, and then we kind of, build our plan backwards from there. So waterfall can be very appealing, especially to senior management, to the higher level decision makers, the ones who are basically saying, I need to apply my resources, I need to figure out my, I need to apply my resources, I need to allocate those and kind of figure out where I'm going to use them and where I'm going to invest my time and money. This also extends into now the ability to budget those resources. So when I have that clear goal, I now have that longer term planning, the ability to budget my resources. But of course there's a catch-22 there, because the further out I try to do this, the less accuracy and detail that I have. Easy to understand the process. So why do we call it waterfall? Because typically the process is relatively sequential. So it's like, A leads to B, which leads to C, which leads to D. And if I think of, a waterfall, especially when you have steps where you've got like, sort of the water comes down a hill and then pools a little bit and then goes down the next hill and that kind of thing. So it's relatively easy to understand from the outside. And this is where that external stakeholder challenge that we saw within Agile can be more challenging. The final advantage is the scalable to a wide range of projects. Now, Agile really is targeted and designed and built for software development, as where Waterfall is really designed for a wide range of projects. Now, to help deal with this, one of the key techniques is rolling wave or phased, which we've talked about in our previous webinars. And we would invoke this for those longer term projects where I've got larger, bigger elements. And in fact, even within Agile, you tend to do that. So you'll phase it, and you'll develop this one little piece and develop this one little piece and develop this one little piece. And this is probably the biggest connection point between, or the biggest disconnection point between Agile and Waterfall. It's really the length or the phase of the wave. In Waterfall, we tend to do 3 to 6 months as a rolling wave. In Agile, you do 3 to 6 days. So there's definitely advantages with Waterfall, there's definitely advantages with Agile. So let's take a look at some of the disadvantages with Waterfall. The first one is the perceived resistance to change, and I very purposely put the word perceived in there, because it is a perceived. There's actually nothing in PMBOK, there's nothing in PMI, and there's nothing in that framework that says you should not do changes. They just say you should manage those changes. And the word control often comes in, and the control is associated with prevention. It's really about ensuring the right changes come in, but we get this perception, especially for the non-PM savvy types, who look at it and say, well, I need to control changes, or I need to stop changes. If I'm developing a plan, I need to build to that plan, and so on. So it can have that perception. Waterfall can also be very process heavy, especially when you look at things like approval cycles. So what happens oftentimes within the waterfall environment is we're doing all kinds of planning, we're doing all kinds of analysis, we're doing all kinds of things before we even start. And then once we start, then we start to create some product. So if we take a look at the timelines of the two projects, in an Agile project, you're going to start to see deliverables very early in the process. In fact, reading into some of the details of this, they're talking, within the first couple of weeks, you want to actually start to create some deliverables, which makes your stakeholders, pretty happy that they're starting to see some results. As we're in the waterfall, it's a little bit more of a, let's plan this out, let's think about this, and let's get our ducks in a row, and then we'll get to work. So we get this sort of, quick start versus slower start kind of thing. And of course, we've got to be careful that we don't get process heavy, especially around the approval cycle, because that can be quite a thing where it takes a long time to get the process or to get the approvals. And then finally, waterfall can be used as a shield. And by this, what I mean, when I say used as a shield, people can kind of stand behind it and say, well, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to fill in all these forms, and I have to sign off all these documents, do all this and this. And if you get someone who, we're not 100% sure on taking that first step, okay, well, let's do our planning first, right? And so we use this process, this methodology, as kind of a shield to help us, take that first scary step, or prevent us from taking that first scary step. So it's really about, we want to find the right balance between, the action and the result. So common issues with both. So what I want to do is I want to move away from the word V versus, and want to look at, how can we use them both together. So, both has their advantages and disadvantages. So here's some common issues I saw with both. Some common issues: misapplied or misunderstood. So one of the things I've been seeing with a lot of our clients, they've been doing waterfall for years. They've been having, reasonable success managing their projects, and then of course the great agile, silver bullet comes along, and hey, this will solve all of our problems, and then they implement it and find it wasn't the panacea that they had hoped. So we want to make sure that both applications, waterfall and agile, are properly applied, and they're also properly understood. Because if I misapply either methodology, it's not going to be a good day. If I don't fully understand them, again, not going to be a good day. Both require skilled resources. Okay, I do argue that agile, you actually have a higher level of skill required, and I think this is part of the reason why we tend to see from our first poll that what did we have? We had 80% doing mostly waterfall with a bit of agile, or all waterfall. Okay, and I think that the amount of skill required, and especially in the smaller projects, the amount of skill required to do a waterfall implementation versus an agile is actually less. So that makes it a little bit easier to use, right? So if we think about those tools and things in our lives that are easy to use, those are the ones that tend to get used, right? So we definitely have a slightly lower skill requirement. Both require discipline, and again, the more we have good skilled resources, the more we have good discipline around those resources, regardless of our methodology, the better we're going to do. And both of them are a tool. They're not the answer. The answer here is to get the job done. The answer here is to deliver to our customers, to deliver within acceptable parameters, whatever those parameters look like, to get to that acceptance. And both of them are tools to help us get there, right? And I think that's an important thing that we need to make sure that we are staying, cognizant of. So just going to ask our final question for our session: when can or should we apply each? So we're really basically saying, when should I apply agile? When should I apply waterfall? So just open that question up. Okay, starting to get some answers flowing in, which is great. Oh, I'm loving these answers. These are great answers, guys. Okay, so let's start to talk about some of these. So the first one, waterfall for complex projects from Rajesh. I totally agree. When you get those big, large, complex projects, waterfall starts to make a little bit more sense. To kind of build on that, Serge says, Agile is good for 1 to 2 developers teams only. And while you can do Agile with bigger teams, again, we get into that discipline and skill piece, which makes it really, really challenging to do. So yeah, when we've got those small teams, the smaller the team, it's easier to be Agile, right? Absolutely. And then we get into the larger teams, and it's getting to a point where, we've got too many players here. We gotta kind of bring that down a bit. Well, defines on the nature and magnitude of the project, totally agree. And now we want to kind of tighten that down a little bit and say, which ones, is it big, is it small, what does that look like? And I love Beth's answer. This is a great answer, Beth. Agile when technology is flexible enough to support it. Yes, yes, yes. There is actually a lot of work being done by various people around the world to look at how do we apply Agile to other types of projects other than just software projects. And there was a short-lived attempt at doing Agile construction. So you're actually talking about physical construction projects. And one of our clients that we do a lot of work with tried to implement that. And right now, they've gone back to Waterfall. And I'm actually forbade to use the word Agile on site because it didn't go well. So we've got to put this in the right, appropriate area. So when the technology is flexible enough to support it. And when we say technology, we don't necessarily mean software, computer technology, right? It's when the environment is flexible. Depends on what type of work needs to be done, Michael, absolutely. Long-term projects, Agile, short-term for Waterfall, interesting. So, Setter, I'm curious. You're thinking I can't use Agile on a short-term project? I'd be interested to hear some more expansion on that because I would almost have thought it would be the other way around. So I like this one from Nelson. Agile investigation projects, so like your R&D type stuff, and then Waterfall for the rest of them. Love it. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And we're gonna build on that point in a few moments. Agile, when we are expected for high frequent scope, not fully defined at the start. Yes, David, beautiful. So Agile can actually be a way for us to get movement on what might have otherwise been a Waterfall project when I don't have all of the full bits developed or the requirements. Yeah, so Ed saying, I get the impression that Agile works best when there's a small number of applications at play. Yeah, you can again do it with larger number of applications. So if I get into a complex environment where I've got lots of interaction in different places, but again, it ups the need for the discipline, it ups the need for the communication. And if I've got a very complex piece of software that interfaces with multiple other pieces, Waterfall might be a better approach because I need to think through if I make this one change, and then it's going to affect 5 other systems. Have I thought that through? Waterfall for the rest of projects. Yep. Agile good for a project with rapidly changing requirements. Waterfall is good for stable long-term projects. Totally agree. Breen, hope I got your name right. Roberta's saying projects with limited business involvement. Okay, I think that's a build on a previous answer, so let me just go back. Waterfall, Roberta, yes, absolutely. So Waterfall for projects with limited business involvement. And we want to be careful, though, Roberta, if we go down that path, because while Agile does require constant involvement, and I'm thinking by limited, what you really mean is not limited from the amount, but more limited from a time. So my involvement with the business is in a short spurt at the beginning to do the definitions, and then I go away and do the build. So in that model, yes, totally agree. We just want to be careful that we don't disconnect from the business and make sure that we're meeting their expectations. So from Charles, again, building on what we said earlier, final projects well-defined, Waterfall, Agile, rapid, less well-defined, final product, right? So it kind of develops as it goes. And then I'll finish off with this final one. It does not have to be an either-or question. Yay! Thank you, Donald. In large environments, it may be Agile for inception and the end and system testing and may move to Waterfall throughout. Yay, that's exactly where I wanted to go with this whole thing. So thank you so much for that. I totally agree. And this is where I say I want to take away the word versus from this and put in the word Agile and Waterfall. Use them in their appropriate areas. And for those of you who are on a previous webinar for critical path method, this is a slide from that one where I basically said you cannot timeline research, but you can timeline production. So we're actually, and we discussed this in that session, where we basically are professing that you should be applying both of them in their appropriate areas so that you can, use Agile when it makes sense, use Waterfall when it makes sense, switch between the two appropriately, and make sure that you're, at the end of the day, it's really about getting the job done. Okay, so what's the verdict? And Donald, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head here, so thank you, my friend. Apply appropriately, okay? Now, both have their merits, both have their environments, both have their strengths, their weaknesses. You know, use the appropriate one for your work, and there's nothing wrong with, you know what, let's do this little piece of this software using Agile, let's do this piece of this software using a more waterfall type thing, you know, whatever that looks like. Consider your environment. Consider, you know, the stakeholders that you have. Consider the type of project that you're running. You know, consider the senior leadership team. Are they willing to, you know, give you more of a carte blanche, you know, go get the job done. We don't really know how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. Or are we much more into a, you have to deliver within a pre-approved timeline and a pre-approved budget? And of course, again, each has their own benefits. Consider your team, consider your staff. What are their capabilities? If you have some really good, experienced, skilled, agile folks, awesome, leverage it, go for it. If you don't, we need to either build up those capabilities or we need to use more of a waterfall approach, because you know what, those are our limitations. So that's kind of my take on it, and I'm finding more and more the discussion is moving in this direction. You know, when I was searching for quotes, when I was looking for, you know, supporting documentation out there on this, and kind of where people's feelings and thoughts are at, when I reread the Agile Manifesto and kind of looked at its core, looked at the, you know, the core principles, it's really about, you know, let's get the job done, let's make sure there's good customer satisfaction there, you know, those sort of factors. So to revisit, Scrum is like your mother-in-law, points out all your faults. You know, it's often those people in our lives that you know, point out our faults, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, dude, I know that, but oh, I hate when you point those out. So and this is what Agile does. It's not very forgiving from a you know, if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the discipline to do that. And then, you know, Peter Drucker, love Peter Drucker, big fan of his work. Nothing is less productive than making more efficient, which should not be done at all.